I'm Nick Hernandez, and you're listening to the Positivity Matters podcast. On this show, we focus on the science of well being, the empirical study of human flourishing. One of the strongest predictors of emotional well being is positive relationships. And one of the people who's done the most transformative work in human relations that I know of is Dr. Daryl Davis. He's an international recording artist who's performed and toured all 50 states and around the world. In addition, he's also an actor and an author. Dr. Davis, welcome to the Positivity Matters podcast.
Well, please call me Daryl, but thank you very much for having me. I'm enjoying being here with you.
This is through the Prohuman Foundation that the connection was made. In creating value for others, my perception of what you do is that you're creating the opportunity for friendship for others, and that many people have taken that in a really beautiful and profound way. And I'll let you share what that looks like, and you can correct me if I'm mischaracterizing what you do and what you're about.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're spot on. And if we, it keeps getting rephrased over the decades, or I could even say over the centuries. Um, when we were kids, I think you were taught, I was taught, and all our friends were taught, treat others as you want to be treated. It was back then it was called the golden rule. And that's essentially what you're saying. Everybody wants to give matter to others, and we want to feel mattered. So treat others as you want to be treated. And so that's what it boils down to. And what I was saying earlier is yes, I have been to 64 out of the 195 countries we have on this planet currently. On 6 continents I visited, and I have performed in all 50 states. And I can tell you something, Nick, firsthand experience. No matter how far I go from our own country, the United States, whether I go right next door to Mexico or right next door to Canada or halfway around the globe to the other side of the Pacific Ocean or Atlantic Ocean, no matter how similar or different the people I encounter may be, I always conclude one thing: every one of them is a human being. And as such, every human being wants these 5 core values in their lives. Everyone wants to be loved. They want to be respected. They want to be heard. They want to be treated fairly and truthfully. They want to have the same things for their family as we want for our family. And if we can learn to apply those 5 core values, or any of those 5 core values, when we find ourselves in an adversarial situation or in a culture or society in which we are unfamiliar or uncomfortable, I can guarantee you that your navigation of that situation, that culture, that society will be much more smooth and much more positive. And I've learned that from being the child of U.S. diplomats. My dad worked for the American Embassy overseas, sent over there by the State Department. So every 2 years I was in a different country somewhere. And in between I came back home. So, his job was to foster better relations with foreign governments, with our own U.S. government. And, I wasn't, focused on that as a kid growing up, but I was around it all the time. And in retrospect, I can see how it worked, and I can see how it shaped me, because being in so many different cultures, I now carry that forward in dealing what I deal with. And what you're getting at is the people that that I deal with, other than musicians, which are predominantly white supremacists. I deal with a lot of KKK members, Ku Klux Klan members, neo Nazis, other racists, black supremacists, white supremacists, etc. And I have found that when I apply those 5 core values, a lot of things happen to be a lot more smooth, a lot more positive, and a lot more productive. And as a result, I have been the impetus for over 200 racists and white supremacists to renounce that ideology.
How did that start?
Well, it started. Let's go back to the age of 10. Well, prior to that, at the age of 3, I began traveling the world. I was born in 1958, so I began going around the world in 1961. My first introduction to school was abroad. And how it works is, the State Department assigns you to a country abroad for 2 years. At the end of the 2 years, you return home here to the States. You're here for a little while, possibly a year, maybe a few months, and then you're back overseas to another foreign country. So my first introduction to school was abroad. I was born in Chicago, but I went abroad in 1961, 3 years later. I did kindergarten, first grade, third grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, all in different schools in different countries. And the in-between grades I did back home here. My classes abroad in the 1960s were filled with kids from all over the world. Anybody who had an embassy where we were stationed, all of their kids went to the same school. So my classmate to my left might have been from Nigeria. The one to the right might have been from Yugoslavia. The one in front of me from Italy. The one behind me from Germany. If you opened the door to my classroom, Nick, and stuck your head in, you would say, oh my goodness, this looks like a United Nations of little children, because that's exactly what it was.
Mm.
That being my first exposure to school became what my baseline for school was supposed to be. However, every time I'd come back home at the end of my parents' assignment, I was either back here in the States, I was either in all black schools or black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. Even though
Mm.
desegregation was passed 4 years before I was born in 58, and desegregation was passed by the US Supreme Court in 1954. Schools did not integrate overnight. It took years for schools to integrate.
Mm.
So, I didn't quite understand that. Well, in 1968, we'd just come back home. I was age 10, and I was in fourth grade. And here I am in a newly integrated school 10 years later, right? And I was one of two black kids in the entire school. Myself in fourth grade, and there was a little black girl in second grade. So
Mm.
everybody else was white. Consequently, all of my friends were fourth graders. So naturally, all of my friends were white. Several of my male friends were members of the Cub Scouts, and they invited me to join. 1968, I joined, and we had a parade with other organizations. I was the only black person in this parade, and I'm marching with my Cub Scout troop. People are waving and cheering and smiling, having a good time, until we reached a certain point in this parade route when suddenly I was getting pelted with bottles and soda pop cans and
Mm.
rocks and small debris from the street by just a small group of white spectators over on the sidewalk. It wasn't a whole bunch of them, just maybe four or five. And my first thought was, oh, those people over there, they must not like the scouts. That's how naive I was, because I had no
Mm.
precedent for this behavior, right?
Mm.
So it wasn't until my scout leaders came running over and covered me with their own bodies and quickly escorted me out of this danger that I realized I was the only scout getting this special protection. So now I'm wondering, what did I do? I didn't do anything. Why are they doing this to me? I didn't do anything. And I kept questioning my scout leaders, and all they would do is kind of shush me and rush me along, telling me everything would be okay. But they never answered my question. So
Mm.
when I got home that day at the end of the parade, my parents were not there. They'd gone somewhere else, but they were home when I got there. And they were asking me, how did I fall down and get all, scratched and scraped up? And they're cleaning me up, putting band aids on me and things. And I told them I didn't fall down. I told them what had happened. And for the first time in my life, at the age of 10, my parents sat me down and explained to me what racism was. Now, this is why it's so important to understand my upbringing and how all this started. Because
Mm.
up until that point, I had no experience with racism. I was around people from all over the world, literally, and we all got along.
Mm.
And so when my parents were telling me this, it was incredulous. My 10-year-old brain could not process the idea that somebody of a different color or would consider my color to be offensive for something and want to inflict pain upon me when they didn't even know me, had never spoken to me, knew nothing about me. So literally, I did not believe my parents. I never even
Mm.
heard of racism before. What is this stuff you're talking about? And to prove that I was right and they were wrong, I pointed out the fact that everybody in my Cub Scout troop who loved me, as far as I knew, um, looked just like the people throwing bottles and rocks. The people overseas, my friends overseas, whether they're my little French friends or Danish or Swedish or Australian friends, did not look any different from those people over there on the sidewalk. They didn't behave like that. So color had nothing to do with it. My parents were wrong. Well,
Mm.
this was 1968, and a lot of things happened in 68. And I remember very clearly April 4th of that year, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and this whole country erupted in violence and flames, literally burning down buildings and everything else, all in the name of this new word I had learned called racism. So I accepted that my parents had told me the truth. This phenomenon does exist. However, I didn't know why. Why are people racist? So at
Mm.
that age, I formed a question, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And for the next 57 years, because I'm 67 now, I've been looking for the answer to that question. Who better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization whose whole premise is hating people who don't look like them or who don't believe as they believe? So that's what put me on this trajectory.
What does friendship mean to you?
Well, friendship means different things to different people. Um, I say I have a lot of friends. Some people close to me say, no, you have a lot of acquaintances. But, yes, you do have a lot of friends, but not as many as you may think. Um, I try to be friendly to everybody. And, when I shake somebody's hand, I may be shaking hands with a stranger when I first meet them. But when I shake their hand to say goodbye, I feel like I'm shaking hands with a friend,
Hmm.
whether I see that person again or not. I want them to know that I'm a friend. I mean, unless we've had some kind of conflict, we punch each other out or something, and we part ways. But I mean that rarely happens. Sure, it's happened from time to time, but um, but no, I try to present myself in a friendly manner, and I try to be people's friend. Now, of course, being somebody's friend and developing trust are a couple of different things. You can have a lot of friends, but some of them, you may not trust, right off the bat. They have to earn that trust, and that's common with everybody. Now, one thing that I've noticed, and people talk about it a lot and say that everybody does it. I disagree. Everybody does not do it because I don't do it. And I can tell you why I don't do it, but I do understand that a lot of people who've not had, my upbringing or childhood or whatever, I understand how they do it. It's called tribalism. People will tribalize. When the going gets tough, they go back to what they know or the people they know, people who look like them, etc. Well, if you've always been around people from all over the world, then the whole world becomes your tribe. But if you've only been raised in an all Italian neighborhood or an all black neighborhood or an all Jewish neighborhood or an all white neighborhood, that's your tribe. And so, if you go into an unfamiliar or neighborhood that looks a little different, people look a little different than you do, and something happens, you gravitate towards the ones that look like you, that speak your language, that have your culture. That's called tribalism. But having been around all kinds of different people and different cultures, I tribalize with everybody. I mean, literally, because that's how I was raised. And you'll find, when I was a kid, um, all the dolls, whether they were girl dolls or boy dolls, like I had GI Joes and all that kind of stuff, right? The little girls that I knew, because I didn't have any sisters like that, but they all had Barbie dolls, and other little dolls. But all these dolls were white, whether they were male or female. They were white. They were not black. They were not Asian. They were not Hispanic. They were white. Okay, so um, if that's all you're exposed to, then that's all you know. And you're being subliminally brainwashed that this is how it is supposed to be. But if you raise your child with multi ethnic dolls, black dolls, white dolls, Indian dolls, Eskimo dolls, whatever, as a child, because kids are sponging information all the time, and then by a certain age, the brain locks.
Mm.
and it's harder to influence the brain because they're kind of set. And so if you raise them on multicolored dolls and things like that, that becomes their norm. Just like the Nations classroom was my norm.
Mm.
So there was no tribalization.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. As you were talking, a thought occurred to me that about travel and maybe why traveling is so important, and it touches on what you were just saying
Well,
there. So,
let me tell you my favorite quote of all time. It's by Samuel Clemens, otherwise known as Mark Twain. And Mark Twain had a lot of great quotes. And my very favorite one is called the travel quote. And Mark Twain said, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow mindedness. And many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime."
one of the grand questions of human existence, I think, is something like, what does it mean to live a good life? I've been trying to wrap my mind around it and put it in a simple format as possible. And I was wondering if you'd offer a thought on this. I came up with Happy Life for an acronym, and it's health, aesthetic experience, play, pleasure, sort of as a reference to positive emotion and happiness. Yes, saying what values do we say yes to in thought and action? The web of life, information, knowledge and know how, friendship, and engagement or absorption and flow. And I have heard rumor that getting into the zone in as a musician is like one of the things that makes it such a compelling thing to do. That's my picture of well-being. I was wondering if that speaks to you in any way. Is there too much there or too little? What would you add? What would you take away? If you'd be willing to humor me on that.
Sure, I think that paints a great picture of what happiness is, and happiness also equates to success. People define success differently. Some people define it as financial wealth. Others define it as uh, being able to to not be sick.
Hmm.
Go through life without catching some major disease or breaking some bones or whatever. Um, to me, you know, success defines somebody being able to make a living, healthy, make a living and be happy.
Mm.
Um, I became a musician. Now, let me tell you something interesting about this. A lot of people don't consider music to be work. All right. Because they work a 9 to 5 job, sitting behind a desk, or they're out in the field, or, whatever it is they're doing, strenuous or stressful, what have you. Um, they consider music to be recreational, not a serious job. Because sometimes, when I meet somebody for the first time, they'll say, they might, work in computers or work in, whatever they do. And they say, so what do you do, Daryl? I said, oh, I play in a band or whatever. Yeah, yeah, but what do you do for work? Yeah, I'm like, what? I just told you what I did, right? So, um, so because when you think about it like this, when people get up in the morning and take their shower and get ready to leave the house, and you say, where you going? They say, I'm going to work. And when I get ready to leave the house, where you going? I'm going to play. What do I mean by that? I'm going to go play my piano. I'm going to go play my guitar. I'm getting paid to play, right? Um,
Hmm.
the word play, ever since childhood, has been associated with having fun, having some kind of recreational activity. When you were in school, you had recess. You go and play. After school, you go out and play with your friends. Play, play, play. Well, so when I say I'm going to play, I'm actually going to work, but it translates to, oh well, this guy is not serious. He doesn't have a real job. All he does is just play around all day. you know so it's a mind-boggling thing for people who don't understand that. So a lot of times I have to catch myself and say, I'm going to work. Oh, what do you do? Well, I'm going to go play music. Well, what kind of job is that? Well, it's a job I get paid for, you know? Um, Music is the universal language,
Mm,
and it brings people together. It brings happiness. So in terms of my well-being, I'm healthy and I'm happy and I'm successful. I'm able to play music that I enjoy, as you put it, go into that zone where I feel happy. My life is in balance when I'm playing and I'm in that zone, and I'm being paid to get myself in that zone and make others happy, right? And I'm able to pay my bills. So that is a healthy life, and a happy life. Um,
mm,
and think about it like this for a second. Um, I know a lot of people, and so do you, who will say, I hate my job. I hate my boss. But I got to be there. I got to pay the bills. I got to pay my car note, pay my mortgage. So, put food on my kids, on my family's table, send my kids to college. Otherwise, I wouldn't be working for that guy, or I wouldn't be working at that place. They hate their job. They hate their boss. So they're making tons of money. They're putting their kid through college. The bank is not knocking on their door for to get ready to foreclose their house. So are they successful? Well, financially, yes, they are, but they're stressed out. They're doing something they absolutely hate, and they got to do it until they turn 65 and they retire, if they're able to retire at that point because they have enough money in the bank. But are they successful? Are they healthy?
mm,
That's not a healthy environment. I love my job. I love going out to play. Now there are times when I may be a little under the weather. I got a sore throat. I can't sing as well as I want to sing or whatever. Or I'm tired. My fingers are not working on the strings of the piano, or, as well as I'd like them to. We all have those days, right? But in general, I'm very happy. I'm happy to go play. I love my boss. You know why? Because I'm my boss.
mm.
I mentioned earlier that music is the universal language. Okay, so let's say
Mhm,
tomorrow is Friday, right? I'm a musician. I spend all week long, playing gigs, entertaining people so they can dance and have fun. And I'm on my stage, playing the music with
mhm,
my band, right? So let's say tomorrow I don't have a gig. I'm off. So guess what? I don't want to entertain anybody. I want to be entertained. I'm going to go out and hear me some music. I'm going to go out and get
mhm,
on the dance floor and dance to the band or the DJ or whatever, right? So I go down to the club down the street, and there's a dance floor there. Maybe a band is playing, maybe a DJ, whatever. There's music playing, and I want to dance. So a good
mhm,
song comes on, and the dance floor is filling up. I look around the club to see if I see a unattached female that maybe I can dance with, and I see this lady sitting at the bar by herself. No, she's not attached to anybody, and she's patting her hand on the bar in time to the music, which obviously means that she enjoys the song. So I don't know her. I'm going to walk over to her and say, "Hey, excuse me, would you care to dance?" She's going to say, "Yeah, sure." And she hops off the bar stool, and now we're on the dance floor. If it's, I don't even know this woman, right? If it's a slow song, we have our arms wrapped around each other, and we're turning slowly around on the dance floor, right? I don't even know this person, and we got our arms wrapped around each other. All right. If it's a fast song, we're standing apart, we're shaking, so forth and so on, wiggling around, dancing. And then at the end of the song, I escort her back to her seat and say, "Hey, thank you for the dance. By the way, my name is Daryl." And she says, "My name is Mary," or whatever. And she says, I say, "Mary, so what do you do?" And she tells me she's the VP of some major corporation on the East Coast or something. And well, man, she's making $500,000 a year. And she says, "So Daryl, what do you do?" And I tell her, I'm a busboy at some chain restaurant. What am I making? $9,000, $10,000 a year? How do two people that far apart on the financial spectrum come that close with their arms around each other and not even know their names?
mhm.
That is the power of music, Nick. That is the power of music. And that's
You're
why I use this to bring people together. And you can read a lot about this and how people, listen, I did not major. I went to college, I got my degree. I got my degree in music. I did not get it in sociology or psychology. But if I can do this as a single person, not necessarily with a whole team of people. Yes, I do it with a team of people at the Prohuman Foundation, but we all are individuals and we all bring something to the table, and that's the beauty of the Prohuman Foundation. But we all can do things on our own to make this a better society, to give people a healthy and happy life. And all that is detailed in my brand new book that people can find on Amazon. It's called The Clan Whisperer. Clan spelled KLAN, as in KKK, right? The
Mm.
Clan Whisperer. It's a brand new book on Amazon. And I suggest people pick it up and read more about about this and how they too can make their lives a lot happier, a lot healthier, and a lot more successful. And also check out the Prohuman Foundation at prohumanfoundation.org and learn how they can be a part of it and join humanity with us.
Daryl, thank you so much for doing what you do and being a guest on the podcast. It's been a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure. Let's do it again sometime, my friend. See, you're
Sounds
already my
great.
friend.
Yeah, I
we,
love
we,
it.
we didn't tribalize, right?
My friend Daryl, thank you.
Thank you, sir.